Ryan's Midlife Crisis Journal, day 38, I'm going to guess. I thought of some, I didn't write it down. I thought of some other good tips I probably could have done. I got to get back to the tips. Stuff to actually think about some of the tips, because like when you have a good one, you really internalize it. Yeah, anyway. I guess one thing I want to talk about today, I was thinking about this. So I don't know if people have this, like, they have the thought about, like, what would a cool, like, novel be? What's a cool story? If someone were to be like George R.R. Martin and write a, start up a book series, or even J.R.R. Tolkien or anything like that, like, late in life, what would their story be? And I also think it's important that when you have this, that you have, like, a story to tell. There's obvious things you can do to just create stories that fit certain arcs. For example, using the hero's journey as a template for a story, but that's stuff because, like, someone with more of like an engineering kind of mind like I do, I think I'll come up with concepts of stories instead of, say, like, emotional stories to start from, which I think is interesting from, like, an interesting idea, but not necessarily a gripping story. So I've always liked the idea of a story where you have people, it starts off, it's like a medieval fantasy kind of setting. There's like a war or battle going on, and the character dies in battle, and something happens either where they either basically wake up on, like, they wake up and it's actually like the far future, and they're living through a simulation to try and, learn to teach about, like, to test out strategies before a battle with an alien race, and they do it in like a fantasy type setting, or medieval type setting, or that's the setting, but they don't necessarily go to experience like the spaceship. They stay in the setting after they're supposed to, and have to and end up having to find a purpose in the context of, the war against the aliens while they're in the simulation, like something like that. Because I think there's also there's a chance that if, we're talking about, like, we're living in a simulation, that's a possible reason why, is that humanity is testing out strategies for a battle with an alien race. But the thing is, like, that's like a concept. That's not really a story. And I was thinking yesterday, like, all right, well, what if I just took an allegory, as much as Tolkien hates it. I love Lord of the Rings. I wouldn't want to go against what Tolkien likes either, but allegory for, like, my life and stuff, because the midlife crisis thing seems a little bit like that. I fought the battle early on, and then I stayed behind even when I'd done, like, accomplished the task. So, for example, me doing what needs to do to basically land my wife in college, which some people thought that I had gone from friend zone into boyfriend zone, and that's kind of an accomplishment if that's what happened. I don't think I was ever really in a friend zone, but that could be the story. But then instead of, like, being something like that, I would just being the most attractive version of myself would be, like, kind of like the battle in a way. I don't know. I thought that could be kind of interesting. I'm about to say, like, all right, I'm actually liking the videos too. I made a bunch of them that I think are decent quality too in the past couple days, between the gaming stuff, the trivia stuff. I don't want to say, like, oh, actually, no, now my goal is I'm going to write a novel, But as far as a list of things to do, that would be kind of cool. And I've done a lot of things that, like, little life checkpoint things. Like, I've gotten paid as a freelance writer for like sports stuff. I've got a monetized YouTube channel, you know, like all these little things. Writing a book at some point isn't beyond the pale, but those are just my thoughts on that, I guess. Then I have to, you know, the story needs an ending then, right? Or not ending. Hopefully not ending. Hopefully it doesn't end. But the story needs like a main arc to go beyond like the winning the battle early in life. Like once you stay behind, you have to find the way, the true purpose is, which kind of what I'm doing now. So yeah. All right. Day 38 or so in the books.